What's going on, folks? Ted from Nerd Immersion here, and we're continuing the Nerd Immersion's Guide to Everything series, where today we'll be talking about squeezing in 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons. You can thank Michael Cullen over on Twitter for suggesting this topic. There's not a lot to go over as far as squeezing goes in 5e, but it's something I don't think I've ever used and I don't see come up very often, so maybe this will be a highlight for it for folks who are unaware, and maybe it'll lead to us expanding on it in a future video. So before we dive into squeezing in 5e, let's talk about the sponsor for today's video, Skillshare. If you've been on the internet and watching YouTube for a while, I'm sure you're familiar with Skillshare and what it is, but if not, it's an online learning community with thousands of different courses, classes where you can learn a variety of different topics. And they've recently launched their premium version where you can get a premium subscription for less than $10 a month. And this will basically allow you to focus solely on learning, no ads or anything to distract you as you continue through the various courses that you'd like to take. I thought I'd show you my Skillshare and a couple of the different courses that I've picked out here. Obviously, you know I make videos here on YouTube, and I'm always striving to make the channel better for all of you, so I'm looking to get into classes from a variety of different things, but audio editing, video editing, right? I use Premiere Pro for the services, and I basically just have a basic understanding of how to cut videos and things like that. But I'd love to learn more about how to use it and really dive into the tools that I have access to and I just am completely unaware of. Or maybe you just want to learn how to make the best grilled cheese, and you could do something like this class, The Perfect Grilled Cheese, by the folks from Plated and the teacher here, Ilana Karp. And honestly, I never thought to do a 4-cheese grilled cheese sandwich, but apparently that's the best way to do it. So I'm going to be using Skillshare to help me do that. Plus, you know, we went through all of 2020 and who knows what 2021 is going to bring. So maybe this is the time for you to do the thing, right? Learn what you wanted to do and figure out, take that time, take a class, better yourself. So the first 1,000 of my subscribers who click the link that's down in the description will get a free trial of the premium membership, and you can use that to go forth and explore your creativity. Thank you to Skillshare for sponsoring this video. Let's move on to squeezing in 5e. So it's in the combat section of the player's handbook. I believe it's also found in the basic rules for 5e. So you're going to be scrolling down here and you're going to get into the size area, right? Well, this is where it's going to allow you to move through people's spaces. And there's basically just this one little paragraph, which seems kind of silly to me that it's only one little thing, but let's take a look at it, right? So squeezing into a smaller space. A creature can squeeze through a space that is large enough for a creature one size smaller than it. Thus, a large creature can squeeze through a passage that is only 5 feet wide. While squeezing through a space, a creature must spend 1 extra movement for every foot it takes and has disadvantage on attack rolls and dexterity saving throws. Attacks against a creature that creature have advantage when it's in a smaller space. So basically, this is something that I don't think ever comes up, and it's something that I'm kind of curious about myself, right? So if we're looking at a battle grid, and not to say you're using a grid for your combat, but humor me here, right? It is a large creature is 2 by 2, right, on a grid, right? A medium creature is 1 square, large is 2 by 2. Well, if you've designed a dungeon with a 5-foot-long hallway, and I've done this, and, you know, well, you can't fit your horse, your mount, or the enemy can't fit through this 5-foot hallway, that's it. Well, I guess you're going to stay in the 5-foot hallway where you're safe and just barrage them with ranged attacks or so on, or you can't bring your horse into the dungeon kind of a thing. Well, technically you can, right? Squeezing says that if they're a large creature, they can move through a 5-foot wide hallway. It says that 1 foot of extra movement, which is basically how we handle almost difficult terrain, although it's not. So if something in that hallway is difficult terrain, it would double the effect, right? Because this is squeezing makes you reduce. So you're going to use basically double movement to move. So if you want to move 5 feet, it's going to use 10 feet of your movement. If it's difficult terrain, that'll be doubled again. And you have disadvantage on attack rolls and dexterity saving throws, but also creatures attacking that creature have advantage. So this means, like, the paladin or whoever has a mount, a horse, you can essentially force your mount to squeeze into this 5-foot-long hallway and make its way through the dungeon if you want. Another common thing would be the door, right? A 5-foot door. They can make it through. they're going to have disadvantage on attack rolls and dex saves, and enemies are going to have advantage on it. But that might not be a bad thing, right? I mean, the amount of times as someone who plays paladins pretty frequently, them being my favorite class, that I haven't been able to take my find steed or find greater steed mount with me into a dungeon is significant, right? I haven't been able to do that because the DM says, well, it's only 5 foot wide hallways. You can't do that. Actually, I can. I mean, there's detriments to it, sure, and good luck trying to get back out, right? If you have the horse coming in behind you, the war horse coming down the hallway, and you need to backtrack real fast, well, now you got to deal with you can't basically maneuver through each other to get through there. You have the horse blocking up the whole thing, so that might be a problem for you, but that's a thing you could do. But it also works the other way for enemies. The parties can't, like, if you're fighting an ogre in a big room with a 5 foot hallway, one thing that I feel like a lot of people don't think about is, how did the ogre get into the 5 foot or into the big room through the 5 foot hallway? Well, it probably had to come in, or your party is going to be searching everywhere for the hidden 10 foot wide room or hallway or secret door that allowed the ogre to get into that room, when really it could have just been uncomfortable, sure, but squeezing through the hallway to get into this bigger room. And they might say, well, we'll just backtrack into the hallway and then it can't get us. Well, it can. It's going to be difficult. And I could definitely see some interesting cinematic moments of something. You see it in movies and TV all the time, where there's like that big creature's like trying to claw through the hallway and trying to make its way in, chasing people, and they're like backing up and it's climbing down. Obviously, if this was, say, something like a dragon, this could be even worse, because if its head's in the hallway, the breath weapon still works down the hallway, even if it's just the head. But it says, you got to remember that it's scaled like that. So a creature can squeeze through a space that is large enough for a creature one size smaller than this. So you got to scale this up too, right? So a huge creature that would be 15 by 15 in a grid could fit into a large size designed one, and then it scales all the way up. So your gargantuan dragon could fit, I guess, through a huge size hallway. So if you think about, put that in perspective for you, right? A gargantuan dragon could fit in a hallway that's designed to fit a regular giant. They just have to squeeze through. So it's something I don't see come up too often, like I said, or at all. I know I personally haven't used it, but I think it could really add some interesting dynamics to combat that we just haven't seen before, by forcing these larger creatures into smaller spaces. Or again, like I said, the pulling the pony or the horse through the dungeon, even though they couldn't normally fit. But again, if the room opens up, if you're pulling your war horse through the dungeon at half speed, but then the next room you get into opens up into a large cavern, well, then now you've got your mount in that room and you're good to go. So I don't know. I'm curious what your thoughts are. Have you used squeezing in 5e in your games at all? Again, I know things like oozes and stuff, and I think there's certain classes that have the ability to squeeze without using the extra movement. I think the original kobolds back in 3.5, that was sort of a mechanic that they had. They could squeeze through spaces with no detriments just because of the nature of how kobolds were. I also think that would be an interesting concept to start implementing on different races, certain kinds of races, like let's say a more smaller race, but I guess that's something else I didn't even think of. A small race like a gnome or a halfling could squeeze into a space that's designed for a tiny creature, right? Because it goes small and then tiny. They could squeeze through the space designed for a tiny creature, though, again, with half movement, which is something I don't think that's ever considered either. They could really fit through a very small space, just albeit with detriments. But that would be an interesting racial feature to add to something where they're able to squeeze through a space smaller than them with no negative side effects of any kind. I don't know what you would call that. I imagine it would be some sort of ability in the same vein as like powerful build, how it's sort of a standard language that you can just apply to a race where you count as one size larger for carrying capacity. Maybe you call it slight. Maybe that sounds actually pretty good. Maybe I might have pulled that from an old edition and it just stuck in my brain. But like slight build, this character, this race, you can move through one size smaller than you, like an area designed for one size smaller than you without squeezing. And then that would then force people to go look up the squeezing mechanic, which would draw more light to it, which might get it more use. So I actually really like that. So I think I might try to design some race or give this ability where it allows you to do that. And I'm curious what you think. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Would you like to see squeezing appear more in your 5e games? Are you going to use it more? Or maybe you've been using it the whole time and I'm in the minority on that. So thank you again to Skillshare for sponsoring the video. Again, there'll be a link in the description that you can click for the first 1,000 of my subscribers who want to sign up for the premium content from that. Also, thank you to my patrons over on Patreon for continuing to support me and the channel. And lastly, Candlekeep Mysteries, the giveaway is still ongoing, so jump on that, link for that in the description as well. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.